Welcome, everybody, and welcome to my panel team that I have with us. I am Sharon Constanson. I am chairman of the South African Chamber of Commerce, and really honored to be with a event that we're running today that I'm really passionate about. When it comes to the bush, I'm there. The bush it's harsh, it's real, it's tough. You don't have time to think about your own tough day job when you are out there watching its beauty, the color, the smells. It is just such a special place, the bush, and makes us realize how small and insignificant we are. Through ESG, the modern agenda, through saving these communities, working with them, giving them the opportunity to teach people what we already know as to how important these things are to all of us, to all of our well-being, and also to our sustainability and our future, so that we can leave a legacy for our children. And we can't do that if we eat our world up, or consume our world is probably a better word, where we actually leave no value behind. So it's really critical, and I'm really passionate about it. And this team of people who I've met are just amazing. And I'm looking forward to my first trip with them to, again, it'll be KwaZulu-Natal, to this bush experience that they are developing. So very proud to be part of this as the South African Chamber. So I'm going to introduce the first speaker, and then I'm going to leave James to facilitate the next few speakers coming on. James's early career is around fast-moving consumer goods. He's worked for the likes of Unilever, being an international company, Robertson Spices. Who doesn't know them in KwaZulu-Natal? I still buy their spices. He moved into property 20 years ago and has subsequently been involved in some very large development and construction businesses, and where they have actually developed the properties and the communities. So his focus is the ability to start and finish a project. And that's where his strength comes in. And this is his project, that is his journey. So I'm going to hand over to James, who is going to introduce everybody and then also have a turn to share his passion with you as well. So thank you for being with us. I will pick up with you shortly. Over to you, James.
Thank you, Sharon. Thank you for the most eloquent introduction, and to the Chamber for hosting this event. And hello out there, all of you. I prefer face-to-face. Perhaps I'm a bit old-fashioned, but welcome to the world of webinar. And I hope you enjoy what's on the table today. From some very powerful and empathetic individuals. And if I can start with the mercurial Mr. Grant Folds to start the proceedings. Grant, you probably don't need an introduction, but I'm going to read it out in any case. You are a passionate conservationist, a connector and communicator with a unique ability to bring people together. You have fluency in both Zulu and Xhosa. I've seen that firsthand. You are a best-selling author. Your two books, Saving the Last Rhino and more recently the Rewilding Africa book, are certainly opening doors and connecting people from all over the planet. And I think that's your special skill. You have an enormous empathy for communities in Africa, and the conservation sector that you so beautifully serve is evident in your tireless campaigning. I could talk forever, Grant, but let me hand over to you to just start the proceedings and give your take, your topic today, your on-the-ground experiences around rewilding, and certainly perhaps some anecdotes from your amazing book. Yeah, over to you, Grant.
Thank you, James. Thank you, Sharon. The name rewilding is actually a new one, because it in the past we referred it as range expansion or corridors or the other means of creating new conservation areas. And at the onset of COP26, I think in Glasgow, everybody started using a name called rewilding. There's Rewilding Europe, there's Rewilding Child, Patagonia. It is a buzzword around the planet now. And what it effectively means is that you're just taking land that was subdued to persecution in any form or format and put back into its natural state, including animals, plants, birds and bees, and things that would bring nature back to a landscape. So I just started during COVID, a book, my second book, and serendipitously, it was called by the publisher Rewilding Africa. And effectively, it just means all the problems and all the solutions that we have in creating new landscapes and putting animals back onto marginalized land, making them coexist with humans, and creating a conservation economy. And in doing so, obviously adding to the effects of climate change and all sorts of advantages of modern day conservation. I'm not sure how much time I've got to chat, but maybe I should stop there.
Yeah, thanks, Grant. Thank you for that brief summation on rewilding and how it's important to you as well as the globe. If I could move on to the next speaker. Charles needs also no real introduction for those you know him. I certainly have known him for a lifetime, Charles. You are the founder of Sustainable Future for All. You're a very well-known sustainable business and climate leader with 25 years commercial experience, embedding sustainability into the DNA of many large multinationals, as well as building several purpose-driven businesses as a green entrepreneur. You have run both BP Green Energy, was managing director of both Good Energy and Second Nature, director of Anthesis, and founder of GridServe, and currently the founder of Sustainable Future for All. You're an amazing networker and communicator, Charles, and your topic is a new economic model to regenerate natural capital. Over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, James. Lovely to be here. Lovely to hear Grant. And you were quite short there, Grant. You've got a lot to say, and I want to hear more from you in this conversation because I'm such a fan of yours and your book. I'll never forget going to the book launch, and that was organized by James and others here at the South African Embassy. Thanks to Sharon again. And picking up your book and saying, well, I'm not going to give you £20 right now, but I'm going to read your book and then I'm going to come back and tell you if I can help you. and here we are. We're still collaborating. But I also share the passion, like many of us do here, for wildlife. You can hear I'm South African. I grew up in Johannesburg. There's Sharon doing the thumbs up. I mean, you know, being connected to nature is really, I think, part of the essence of life. And when we get disconnected from nature, I think we all feel quite low. It's the best way to rejuvenate. I'm sure all of us can agree. And I was very fortunate to go to the bush a lot growing up in Johannesburg as a young person. And then at 16, I won a wilderness leadership scholarship to go and join Dr. Ian Player in Umfolozi for a week, which was really life-changing for me, because from that experience onwards, I wanted to have a career in what I called the environment at the time, and now I refer to as sustainability. Because I think the importance of sustainability, which of course is environmental sustainability, one of the pillars, but social sustainability, and then economic or financial sustainability. These three pillars, this is the way the Sustainable Development Goals are framed. They're framed around three pillars. So there's 17 Sustainable Development Goals, and they're split into three. So the social ones, the environmental ones, and the economic ones. And if you can imagine a wedding cake, the bottom layer of the wedding cake is the nature ones, right? The environmental ones. Then the social ones is the middle layer of the wedding cake. And then the economic and financial ones are the top layer of the wedding cake. When I started studying sustainability and figuring out in my 20s, inspired actually by someone that some of you will know called Dick Enthoven, who was very involved in bringing people together to break down the barriers between different races and to meet each other so we could bring about the new South Africa. And then he formed Spear and other models of sustainability, and I was involved in that at the time, working for him. And the idea of business being a force for good and driving sustainable development into the way we do business, so what is good business, I think becomes key. And then, of course, you've got to attract investors into opportunities around sustainability. And that's the big challenge for anyone working in this field, is how do we attract investment? So there are various companies that have done very well on this. But right now, I think everyone is looking at the opportunity to invest into nature. So I think it's much more clear cut in other areas of the Sustainable Development Framework where the return on investment is. So, for example, a lot of my career has been in renewable energy. That's much more clear cut. Invest in solar, the payback has come down from 50 years when I first started working in solar to 5 or 6 years here in Europe. So transformed. And I think that the thing with nature is, how do you get investors to see that there is a return? So it's not just philanthropic. And how do you make the business case, like you do for investing in renewable energy? How do you make the business case for investing in nature? And the good news is a lot of work's being done on that all over the world. On the back of the UN process, which I was involved in on the climate side, and of course, climate's part of nature, but unfortunately, the UN is also, like many organizations, silo structured. So you've got UN COP28 happening this year, which is focused on climate, and you've got UN COP15, which has just happened recently in Montreal on biodiversity. Now, on COP15, a lot of progress was made in terms of the global biodiversity framework. And then it was left to the likes of TNFD and other organizations to try and recommend a financial mechanism for investors to participate in regeneration. And I go back to this economic model because if we think about capitalism, at some point, capitalism just became focused on one capital, financial capital. There's far more than one capital. There's natural capital, which is the foundation. If you think of that framework again, there's a similar framework, which is natural capital at the bottom, then social human capital, then financial capital, and then manufactured capital. Very similar to the wedding cake I just showed you. You take resources from nature and you turn it into product of value. And similarly, we need a financial instrument to attract investors into rewilding in Africa, in the UK, in all over the world, regeneration of that base natural capital. How do we get people to rejuvenate natural capital? Because, of course, the whole framework falls down if the base is eroded. So I think that's what I admire Rewilding Africa for taking on this mammoth task. And, of course, we'll come on to the whole community conservancy model that they've worked so hard to basically pitch as a value proposition. Thank you.
Charles, thank you very much, and extremely insightful, and some very, very good words for us to take forward. And that is actually a great platform to introduce our next speaker, Shamla Chetty. If I can introduce you, Shamla, you are currently the CEO of Duke. You are positioned as a visionary driven by transforming organizations and society through leadership. You are passionate about achieving sustainable outcomes through diversity, equity, and inclusion, and environmental, social, and governance. Your areas of research include board leadership, the future of work, humanity and technology, and people practices. Your CV speaks for itself, Shamla. Your topic today is empowering communities and women through education and the important role of the global corporate community in rewilding. Thank you. Over to you, Shamla.
Good. Thank you so much, Grant, James, and Charles. And just building on everybody, I reflect on my own upbringing in the community and the profound wisdom of my grandmother and the tales of biodiversity and the beautiful, as Sharon talked about, the bush and the nature, and my grandmother instilled in me the belief that every species saved within our precious ecosystem is not just about nature, but it's about affirmation. There's a connection between gender and its community. And we know that, the work that you're doing, James, Rewilding Africa, it's not just about conservation effort. It's a pathway to empowerment for women, for our community. By preserving our natural heritage, we safeguard every foundation upon which our community can thrive. We also see the relevance between women and the responsibility as women bear in our society. As resource management, we find ourselves at the forefront at every ecosystem. So I think it's important that we see our active participation is not only ensuring sustainable use of the ecosystem, but also promotes gender equality by strengthening the fabric of our communities. And the work that you're doing in Rewilding Africa is a valuable tool to education. It offers also a living classroom where future generations can learn, and we can actually protect what we're doing. So it creates a great sense of responsibility for the environment. I think it's all of us that needs to take ownership and to create this opportunity that we can protect nature going forward. As Charles alluded to around, climate change, ESG, these are not a nice to have. It's an important part of who we are, that we can draw strength regarding our heritage. And really, I think it's an important thing to say, how do we create a sustainable world, but a more equitable world, but what you're doing right now?
Thank you very much for that insight again. Listeners, we do have a slight challenge with our fourth speaker, Walter. I have worked quite closely with the Zambezi group to develop the supporter app that we are going to be, well, we've already taken on. It is a very novel and unique methodology for us, for our supporters, and also for the charity community at large. So the app has been taken on and embraced by Rewilding Africa. It is a very simple and easy to use app. This is the first time I've seen Walter's presentation, so it's not going to be flow as smoothly as I'd like it, but those are images of the app in situ. You will be encouraged to download it at a later point, and it's available on the Apple App Store if you are intending supporting Rewilding Africa. And whether that's financial or otherwise, it's a way of us communicating with you directly onto your smartphone. Essentially, the Zambezi Group is a UK tech good for startup. It's a dynamic entrepreneurial team. It's going through the process of getting approval with the fundraising regulator. Those are people in the charity industry in this country know it's a very, very red tape orientation industry. But once you're through there, it's a very powerful and well-established sector in terms of being able to offer support for charities such as Rewilding Africa. The partnership with Charities Trust and Stripe is now in place. And yeah, the Zambezi Group is offering Rewilding Africa an easy-to-use mobile solution for our supporter base. These are just images of how the app looks like on your mobile phone once you've downloaded it. What happens is that whenever a charity is onboarded, you are listed in a directory. So on the mobile app, if you are a donor within the UK environment, you are able to go online and download the app and choose the charity that you wish to support from the directory. And you'll note that Rewilding Africa is in the directory there, as listed with Charities Trust. And once you've downloaded the app, you have the benefit of using all the features on the app, including being able to make safe and secure donor payments. When it comes to the communication tools, there are aspects such as polls. In other words, Rewilding Africa can run polls with our database of supporters, as many people who can download the app as possible, who have a passion around rewilding. And obviously, when a poll has been distributed by myself, whoever's part of the leadership team in Rewilding Africa, that'll come up on the supporter's phone and you are able to vote from your phone. This is just a snapshot of the donor management dashboard. You will see that each charity that is onboarded with Zambezi, you get your own management dashboard. You can trace your donations. You can submit communication to your supporters. And once you press the button from your laptop, that'll end up on your supporter's phone with a little red flash there to say you have a message from Rewilding Africa. And you will read it and stay in touch, stay close to what Rewilding Africa is doing. This is just an example of a typical post. On the left-hand side, you'll see that I would have written that post, and then on the right-hand side, it will appear on the donor or the supporter's mobile phone. Okay, sure. Okay, that's improvisation at the last minute, but I'm sorry that Walter couldn't join us. It was a bit of a technical problem from his side, but I think you all get the gist of it in terms of the mobile app that we'll be offering our supporters. I just firstly want to thank the Chamber of Commerce and obviously the speakers that came before me. those small anecdotes of personal experience, just endorsing the work that we're doing is incredibly powerful. I had a presentation I was going to do to you, but for me, if you are listening to this webinar, you're already involved. You're either emotionally involved, you are technically involved, but rewilding as a topic, as Charles mentioned earlier in the presentation, has become a global issue, not just Africa. We're obviously, our focus is on the African continent, but the learnings that we are all embracing are critical to take rewilding forward as a concept, but as Charles and Shamla intimated, an investable concept. And if we get that, we're going to be moving forward. And that's our mission as Rewilding Africa, to truly try and change ideologies, break paradigms, take conservation out of the donor mindset into the investment mindset. And for that, we need momentum, we need support, and we need methodologies which are on the ground, tried and tested. And that's where Africa lacks fundamentally, is moving from theory into actual implementation. The new initiatives that we are looking at as Rewilding Africa, always trying to kind of move forward with our overall goal. I encourage all of you, and maybe one of you can put our website address into the chat. But if you look on the new website, there's a link into our Rewilding Africa Adventures, which is an initiative around encouraging you, no matter what your budget is, to go out and explore one of our landscapes. Go and have a look, see what rewilding is on the ground, be accompanied by one of the team members, whether it's Grant or myself or another team member. Get involved and do a Rewilding African adventure. And on the website, you will see that we've now marketing a Laziba adventure, which means that if you've got a high-end budget, we will send you on a helicopter ride. We'll give you 5-star game lodge accommodation. If you've got a 2-3-star budget, we've got some wonderful accommodation for you. But you'll always get 10-star hospitality when it comes to Laziba and South Africa. So that's an initiative that we want our supporters to take up, as well as obviously our ambassadors, and I'll get onto the ambassador program shortly. We also have our shop, where we're encouraging not only produce and consumer goods, but also professional services, to list your produce, your professional service on the website. And through this magic of QR codes, whenever we refer one of our ambassadors or supporters to you, you donate a percentage of what they spend with you. And if you go onto online, you'll see that our shop has 2 or 3 items listed at the moment: biltong and wine for those wonderful South Africans over there, and some wonderful eco-friendly cleaning products. But we encourage you, if you're a business listening to us, to talk to us about getting your product or service listed on the Rewilding Africa website. I'll touch briefly on the Impact Fund. It's something that's been at the top of my priority list, but it's a very complex space to play in. I have 2 of our new ambassadors working with me at the moment through a voluntary process, where we are exploring the optimal structure of a Rewilding Africa Impact Fund. Essentially, that would act as a consolidated vehicle, which would then receive funds from all the different sources, whether it's donation or investment or carbon credits or grant funding, and that it would house those funds in the fund and disperse them to appropriate rewilding projects in Africa, promising a certain return on investment. So I'm just putting it out there. If there are any attendees on this webinar who have fund management and facilitation skills, please get in touch with us. Now onto the ambassador program, and if I can just emphasize that when we launched in June, July last year, I was personally involved with coming into the market and saying, guys, we've got this amazing big vision. Our budget is $100 million. And unfortunately, we fell flat. And the reason why, ladies and gentlemen, is that you've got to do small things first properly. And this is what the ambassador program offers us. Whether you've got £1 a month to spare or more than that, what we encourage you to do, and that's why I've been a little bit over the top with the QR technology, look on my right and left, scan those QR codes and become a business or an individual ambassador. It's going to cost you £1 or whatever you can afford. That enables us to scale to continue with our greater vision. And we believe we are putting a lot of emphasis on this ambassador program to not only provide some working capital for our rewilding projects, employ grant fund writers, all those nice things to do, but also it gets you involved in our system. So if you're a passionate rewilder, what I ask you to do is please join us as a business or individual ambassador, contribute what you can afford, and then you become part of the system. And we need an army. It's not just these wonderful souls that have presented next to me today, and Sharon and her passion. I'm saying whoever you are out there, please join us to become part of our community, and let's rewild Africa for all the right reasons. I guess my question or my outreach to all of you listening is that if any of you want to have an idea or a discussion at any point, the phone is there 24 hours a day, and so is the email or whatever other way you want to communicate. So please.
24 hours, really? Careful. You never know what might happen.
But thank you very much. Thank you.
I've got a few questions that we were originally going to put in between, and we decided to have all the conversations first, and now to have a slightly more interactive session now around some of the questions that I would like to put to it. Maybe going in the order in which we started. Grant, you talk about the Laziba rewilding project. Why this one? Why not something else? What is so special about this? Is this the only one? Where's the activity? What's happening? I know when I met you last time in Durban, we were all over the place between rocks and everything else that you were traveling around, and I see you travel quite a bit now.
No, Sharon, just to get back to Dr. Dean Allen, a big supporter of the Eastern Cape and of Adrian Gardner, what Shamwari have done in the Eastern Cape, and I'm a founder at Amakhala next door. I don't think that any one place is more important than the other. This last week I've been in the Green Kalahari around Molopo. That is a very much needed trans-frontier with Botswana that is sort of cattle farming, stroke game farming, stroke hunting, a little bit of eco coming into the process, being far away from anywhere. It doesn't have the air network, it doesn't have the road network. So that is ripe for rewilding of another nature, a trans-frontier with very low carrying capacity, low people. In Natal, we have a high carrying capacity, high rainfall, a lot of people, equally needed for exotics, endangered species like rhino. And in the Eastern Cape, we have more of a quieter population, being the Karoo, parts of the Bavians. So that question to him was very, very important. Around the Van der Kloof Dam, if I can just get back to the Northern Cape or the Free State, there's massive scope for rewilding that area. I worked with John Varty a little while around the Van der Kloof Dam. Also farms that are sheep farms. The migration of the springbuck happened in the years gone by, the migrations of the black wildebeest in the Northern Free State. And that's just South Africa. And last week I was actually in Northern Limpopo in the Waterberg and north right down to Aldays on the Zimbabwe border around Chappies, or equally as important, you know. And then we move into Africa, Uganda, Namibia, the vast areas of Angola. So animals don't have passports, they cross boundaries, you know. So I think, and there's people and there's vast open spaces, and we have elephant problems in Southern Africa. We have elephant problems in Botswana and Zimbabwe. And I think by creating all these landscapes that have bush and very little people are vastly important for endangered mega herbivores. We just need to get the right people in the right place. And it cannot happen, I see Clive Poultney answered, it cannot happen without the local indigenous people. Because when the money leaves, and it's in America or in Wall Street or in London, when the money leaves and the management leaves, the local people are in charge. And if we don't empower them and give them the tools to be able to manage and cooperate with the local government or the local management, they're going to burn and poach and abuse it if they have empty stomachs. So this whole thing, it seems like it's an impossible task, but I think if our job as Rewilding Africa and African communities is to do the small things properly. Africa Parks are doing the big things properly. 22 million hectares, well funded, well managed, and unfortunately not a single project in South Africa. Why? Because we do not have the political will to do things on that sort of scale.
I think that point you were making about the political will, if we could just park that for a moment, because I think that there's an interesting question I'd like to ask on that one. But just to make sure everyone gets their opportunity, and then just to answer the question that was asked as to whether the app can be downloaded, please download it from the app site. It's www.zambezi.app. And that is where you will find it. It's not Rewilding, if that's what you were looking for. Shamla, if I may turn to you.
On the App Store, if I may jump in there, on the Apple App Store, and it's also iOS.
Yeah, so it's iOS, so Apple, Samsung, Google, wherever, it's there. So if you just use the word Zambezi, you should find something you recognize. Shamla, if I may turn to you, please. Coming from a finance and a corporate finance background specifically, how do you see the global corporate community getting behind initiatives of this? We know there's lots of cash on balance sheets globally post-pandemics. People are not sure where to spend their money. ESG is a massive agenda on everybody's boardroom prioritization list. Yet we're not seeing that money necessarily going the way we are all talking. How do we unlock that? How do we reach that money? How do we speak to them in a financial language that will help funding projects like this? To the point Grant was saying, South Africa needs the funding as much as we're getting in the rest of Africa.
Good. Thank you so much, Sharon. And, Charles, you would be smiling on the ESG agenda. But I think Rewilding Africa is undoubtedly a very important initiative that holds huge potential that can bring positive change, not just for the African continent, but from a global scale as well. We know this. I think partnerships and collaboration is important. We need to join forces with rewilding organizations. These partnerships can involve financial backing, in-kind support, knowledge sharing, and also amplifying the impact of conservation efforts. We must talk about it. We must actually get our voice out there and really start amplifying our voices, because I think for too long, we haven't made the voice big enough. The second piece around that is sustainable investment. And you're absolutely correct. There's a lot of money out there, but our organizations, they are earmarking a portion of the capital for sustainable investments in Africa. This may mean creating a very dedicated, investment fund for rewilding. And there's a lot of work done on ESG. This is an opportunity to make, to actually put some criteria, investment decisions around this. The third piece around is carbon offset and emission reduction. Charles and I talk about this a lot, where organizations can invest in carbon offset programs in Africa as part of their sustainability strategies, aligning this with the goals of rewilding. I think we are seeing where companies are committing to reducing the carbon emission. And so we can make this projects to enhance biodiversity and restore the ecosystem. We're also seeing a lot that's happening, but there's a lot of talk on ecotourism and conservation partnerships. And also we can maybe think about green bonds, finance mechanisms to issue green bonds that we can participate in green finance mechanisms as well to raise funds for rewilding projects. These bonds are specifically earmarked for environmental friendly initiatives, very much regarding rewilding, that can attract investors seeking sustainable investments. For me, I think it's important that we actually become more visible out there and actually share what we're doing. And then the long-term commitment, it's essential for organizations to commit, for rewilding as well, biodiversity. I see a lot of companies saying they want to actually be involved in sustainable funding, and this will become critical for success. I think, for me, in summary, as global organizations can make sustainable impact for rewilding by also adopting a multifaceted approach that includes financial contribution, partnership, sustainable investments, and also becoming a voice, not just giving money, but becoming a voice that can regarding a win-win approach for both the environment and better for the world globally as well.
From my perspective, just putting together what I've heard from two of you so far, I'll chat to the other two in a moment, is we need to find money that can look to the passion and find the return that suits their needs, whether that is an emotional return, a sustainable return, a doing good return, or a financial return. And how do they work out for themselves what is that return? And I believe the minds around this table can pull together that solution that each investor or company, corporate, is looking for, individual is looking for. The individual might want to go on a free trip. An investor might say, no, hold on, I need this to deal with my carbon issues, to deal with my sustainability issues, and also for my internal stakeholders, say, look at the opportunities you have because of where we're involved and where we've invested. There is so much power in what you guys are doing. Charles, quick question for you. You've been involved in sustainability, you live and breathe sustainability, and you're always talking about how we can do things better in every respect. From your perspective, if you look at where South Africa sits relative to Africa, and following on what Grant said a moment ago, maybe Grant can come in here on this one, maybe James can as well. Why is it so critical for South Africa specifically right now? Why in your business world is this on people, should be on people's agendas, either to invest or to find other solutions?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think thanks, Sharon. It's looking at risks and opportunities, or looking at liabilities and assets, if you don't mind that language, and how to turn one into another, right? Taking risks, managing them, turning them into opportunities, taking liabilities, turning them into assets. And it's very interesting that on a city's balance sheet, a tree is not treated as an asset. That's the first clue in the issue that we're facing here, is that if we can't actually value a tree as an asset, so it's a liability, right? Can't value a tree as an asset, then of course it's unlikely we're going to get people to invest in nature. However, the good news is that things are changing. So I mentioned the financial mechanisms that are coming on the back of the TNFD consultation from a UN level. Just like carbon credits emerged, we've got nature credits coming at the end of this year, right? And then likewise, the accounting rules are being changed by ISSB and by IFRIC, so that actually nature will start to be accounted for as an asset, right? And again, this will yield opportunities for investors. Now, South Africa in particular has to work out how to manage risks and turn it into an opportunity. And for me, with any company, that's the sort of advice I love to give, is looking at the company's history and the risks they're facing, how to turn those into opportunities. Likewise, with South Africa, the risks they're facing around, for example, energy collapse, system collapse. What has South Africa got in terms of liabilities or risks that can be turned into assets? So much. As we know, the slogan is a world in one country. So how we actually bring public and private actors together to seize those opportunities, especially around our rich resources and nature and communities at the front line of the nature crisis. How do we empower those communities to be part of the solution? And there are mechanisms to do that. And this sort of team here, plus supporters, will help unlock those opportunities.
Thank you, Charles. Quite insightful. What I'd like to just address is picking up one of the questions that was on the chat group around how are you going to measure the impact of investments and work that you are doing in South Africa, in Rewilding Africa. I mean, I invest £1,000. How do I know that £1,000 has been impactfully invested? And how do I know that? How are you going to share that with me? I don't know who's best to answer that question. You choose.
Perhaps I should jump in.
James, you want to start? Maybe we can share.
The rub of the green is exactly that, Sharon, and that's what we call gap impact funding. In other words, funding that gets deployed without certainty of return. And unfortunately, this is an absolute conundrum in Africa's conservation, is that for us to create an investable climate, we have to give money a slightly more reassured return. In order for that to happen, there has to be a process of community engagement and planning to get these landscapes to a point where we understand the sustainable offtake of that particular landscape and we monetize it. And that's called sustainable conservation. That's our community conservancy model, where we go in at grassroots, we engage with communities, we empower them with knowledge, we partner them, we create environments that are conducive for future investment and future impactful returns. But as I say, the challenge that we have is that these millions of hectares of wilderness land are unplanned, undesigned around returns, and generally quite chaotic and very susceptible to abuse. So a large part of our model of implementation is around what we call comprehensive communal planning. And that process, which takes up to 3 to 4 years to complete, will then create an investable map. This is a challenge that that's why I've jumped in here, that the global community is grappling with. And unfortunately, a large amount of it then becomes intellectualized in the cloud. And these people offer what they call biodiversity credits or carbon credits or whatever. And I'm quite skeptical about that, because your point about measurability, what is the on-the-ground measurability in terms of livelihood creation, about the development of what Charles was mentioning earlier, the conservation economy? You know, we need industry. We need conservation industry on the ground in Africa. And that is our goal as Rewilding Africa, is to seed that process of building this conservation economy for the communities in Africa.
Just quickly to help all of you, I've just scanned the code that is holding either side of James, and it takes you directly through to the ambassador program. I'm going to complete the exercise. I challenge all of you to join me. But more important, one of the questions that has been answered is around the carbon and bio credits. You referred to it a moment ago, James, but there was a question to Grant on the, and you answered it directly. You say the returns from rewilding are low. Is this the case, including carbon credits and biodiversity credits? So just for the benefit of the greater population who don't see some of these, don't see this Q&A side, could you just give us, if I'm sitting in a boardroom of a corporate and I have got an amount that I may choose to invest, and I've got project A, B, and C in front of me, what is the USP that Rewilding Africa is going to put in front of me so that I put my investment with you and not somewhere else?
Yeah, maybe the readers or the listeners saw that in the wrong context. We like to tell our investors that if you buy the land or invest in the land that is denuded, your investment is going to make a big return if you sell it. But we're all in it for 10 to 20 years to convert this land. And then you've got other things like roads and infrastructure and replanting trees and bringing in animals and so on. So that's what I meant of the return being extremely low. If you ask anybody at and beyond Pinda or the Waterberg or Shamwari or Amakala how long it takes you to take a landscape from bare ground or denuded agriculture, it's a 10-year process. And that's what I meant by being very low. So I you know, and also, you know, the carbon side of it, Sharon, does take time, because you have to get everybody to do the due diligence, and that is done by an international firm of people that do the baseline. So that is also a long-term business. It doesn't pour money in immediately, and that money is not allowed to buy land. So, you know, it is a very slow return, but if you come in at the right price and you can get the right benefits during your journey, and that is also including educating people and putting resources in all the sustainable development goals, I think the returns are extremely high for corporates and people with the dollar to burn.
And the passion, they're doing something really special in a continent where they can go and see it happening. They can go and get that dust under their fingernails that I talk about, which is so critical. We talk about risk. Every corporate has to de-risk to whatever point they are able to mitigate risk, understand risk, determine their point of zero entry, point of departure, the various ways business are going to handle risks. And bearing in mind, the minute we get a community of people together, a board, a committee, an investment committee, we always end up reducing ourselves to the lowest common denominator of risk and risk appetite in that process. So how do we offer that risk scenario to them of understanding you're dealing in South Africa, you're dealing in Africa, you're dealing in the wild, you're dealing in the communities, you're dealing in an area where poaching is a challenge to anyone in the wild. I mean, I can just think of 5 risks before I even start, and I'm not trying to put everyone off. We've got to be realistic about them. And I'm fully aware that you are addressing so many of those risks in many ways on behalf of being successful. How are you going to share? Can you share some of that with us so that the corporates can understand that value and that de-risking efforts that you put in? Grant? You had the shortest talk at the beginning, so do you want to help with that one? You are on mute.
I spoke the longest, so I was busy typing a message into Robin Brown. So, come on, hospital pass, Charles and James.
Yeah.
I'm giving it to James. I was busy typing answers to the questions in the chat.
Sharon,
while you're all doing that, the QR code next to James gives you the ability to be an ambassador and to contribute. And the Rewilding app, the Zambezi app, is also a ability to be able to give to a certain charity. So you've got the business, the individual, and the app version. So Tanya, I hope that answers your question. She says she can't see Rewilding Africa on that, but we'll address that shortly. Sorry, James, just to make sure anybody else who's
Can I just say there are some really great questions, by the way, really fantastic questions.
So very good quality questions. Right, risk.
Darren, in a nutshell, that is the challenge that Africa conservation and the globe conservation has to address, is how to take corporate boardroom risk assessment and apply it on the ground to achieve the SDGs. And don't forget, the UN also talks to the 30 by 30, which means, you know, guys, we've got 30% of our landscape that needs to be under conservation management. At the moment, we are roughly 6%. And that's in 6 years' time. So in order to facilitate that process, there has to be a rethink at global corporate level on risk. And bear in mind that when you start consolidating, to pick up what Grant was talking about, when you add all the revenue streams attached to a typical rewilded landscape, when you add in the revenues attached to carbon credits, to the game farm, to the ecotourism, to the renewable energy, to the grant funding, because I think the blended finance strategy has to be fully understood. In other words, there has to be a top-up of soft funding in order for these landscapes to truly be conserved. But if you add all of those together in one complex funding mechanism, which is when I referred to about an impact fund. I'm not a financial guy, people. What I'm saying is the financial brains out there need to apply their minds to this, because once we have solved the risk solution, the risk issue, we then unlock enormous baskets of capital to be invested into conservation in Africa, around the world, where there is an expected return over time. This is not, as Grant said, this is not short-term delivery. You have to be long-term invested in Africa. So the answer's out there, ladies and gentlemen, but as I say, we as Rewilding Africa are challenging the process. We need your voice. We need you to join us and start asking the right questions. Contribute your wisdom, your understanding, your networks, and get more people to start talking about this to solve genuine problems, not hypothetical outcomes, genuine on-the-ground outcomes. That's what the world needs, and so does Africa.
So to the point made by Shamla, picked up by one of our delegates, is the development of appropriate green bonds that are very focused on what is being done in this environment and getting those out into the marketplace so people can get both the financial returns, but equally the social returns. And people today do think differently about investment, and they do consider the green element, the environment element, the carbon element, the community element. These are all critical for investors today, particularly our younger investors. And our younger investors, if they start looking at things like this now, small amounts that are not going to hurt, it's just a beer, yeah, or whatever, is the beginning of people investing in a place and a world that makes a vast difference for all of us and all our mental well-being, as well as the well-being of our planet. So on that note, I'm going to thank the panel. You have been absolutely amazing. We're dead on time, and thank you for all your insights and the different lenses at which you came to this presentation. It really was very rewarding for me, and I'm sure it was for the delegates. And we probably rank at one of the highest numbers of engagement on the Q&A's platform we've seen for quite a while. So my message to all of you is this matters to people. They are asking some really interesting and complex questions. And thank you for all the answers you have given, either verbally in this platform where we covered a few of them, but also giving direct answers to the individual delegates. So thank you very much to everybody. I appreciate your time and good luck. And I'll see you soon in KZN.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.